On Mother's Day, my daughter took her mother-in-law on a trip, while I had to go over to take care of my grandchildren. My name is Margaret Ellis. On Mother's Day, the world seemed filled with flowers, cards, and warm embraces, but not for me. Instead, I found myself standing at my daughter's doorstep clutching a grocery bag of snacks and juice boxes, while she and her husband bustled out the door with luggage in tow. "Mom, thank you so much for watching the kids today," she said, her tone airy, almost rehearsed. She didn't even look me fully in the eye as she bent to hug the children goodbye. My daughter, the same girl I had once stayed up with through nights of fevers and homework tears, now spoke to me as if I were a hired babysitter. Her husband chimed in, checking his watch. "We'll be gone just overnight. Don't worry, everything's easy. Dinner's in the fridge." He smiled quickly, then pulled the suitcase behind him. But the moment that cut me wasn't their hurrying. It wasn't even the way they left me holding the responsibility without a second thought. No, it was the fact that this wasn't just any trip. It was a Mother's Day getaway, and my daughter had chosen to take her mother-in-law with her. I stood frozen for a second, the weight of it pressing down. Mother's Day, the one day when children are supposed to show appreciation for the woman who gave them life. Instead, I was handed diaper duty while another woman was being pampered and celebrated. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. The children, Emma 6 and Daniel 4, waved as their parents drove off. Emma clung to me, already sensing something was different. "Grandma, why don't you get to go with Mommy?" she asked, tilting her little head. I swallowed, forcing a smile. "Because I get the best job, honey, spending the day with you." Her innocence made my heart ache. She didn't understand the sting of exclusion, the quiet cruelty of being overlooked. To her, love was simple and straightforward, but for me, it felt like a hollow ache spreading through my chest. Inside the house was neatly arranged, but I noticed something unsettling. On the counter, a catered meal was carefully labeled for Mother's Day dinner with instructions. The containers had notes for my daughter's mother-in-law. Salmon, roasted vegetables, a small cake. It was thoughtful, curated, expensive. Then I opened the fridge again. For me, there were cold leftovers in plastic wrap. A stark contrast. I pressed the fridge door closed slowly. It wasn't about the food. It was about what it represented where I stood in my daughter's life. The children wanted to play, so I pushed my thoughts down and joined them. We built towers of blocks, raced toy cars across the carpet, and laughed until they tumbled over themselves. Their laughter was pure, untainted by adult bitterness. But in between, the questions came. "Why did Mommy buy Grandma Lucy flowers but not you?" Emma asked once, frowning as she drew in her coloring book. I froze, my hand hovering in midair. "Well, I began slowly. Sometimes people forget things. But it's okay. I don't need flowers to know I'm loved." She nodded, satisfied for now. But inside me, a storm brewed. I had been there every step of my daughter's life. And yet she placed another woman higher, as though my years of sacrifice were nothing but shadows fading in the background. As the day wore on, the exhaustion crept in. Daniel spilled juice on the couch. Emma cried over a broken crayon, and I cleaned, soothed, and tucked them into bed. When silence finally filled the house, I stood alone in the dim kitchen, staring at the neat packages left for her mother-in-law. The house, so full of her praise for Lucy, graceful, cultured, sophisticated, was also filled with my absence. I was the invisible worker, the reliable background figure always expected, never celebrated. I sank into a chair and let the truth wash over me. On the day meant to honor me, I had been erased. The night felt endless. I lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling. Memories flooded me, staying up during storms when my daughter was small, scraping together money for her school trips, sewing her dresses by hand. I had poured everything into her, and now I was repaid with scraps and silence. And yet, as bitter as it was, another thought began to flicker in me. A quiet, simmering strength. If she thought I was invisible, she was wrong. If she thought I would accept being replaced, she underestimated me. I didn't know it then, but that Mother's Day was not just another slight to be endured. It was the spark that would ignite something much greater, a reckoning she never saw coming. I whispered to myself in the silence, one day she'll realize what she's done. And when that day comes, it won't be with flowers or apologies. It will be with truth. And so the first seed of my quiet revenge was planted. The next morning began with the sound of tiny feet pattering against the hardwood floor. Daniel burst into the living room, his hair sticking up in every direction, holding a stuffed bear under his arm. "Grandma, wake up, I'm hungry," he announced, his little voice bouncing through the quiet house. I rubbed my tired eyes and smiled despite myself. His innocence was disarming a shield against the bitterness that still gnawed at me from the night before. Emma soon followed, rubbing her eyes and dragging her blanket behind her like a cape. They were beautiful children, unscarred by the cracks that had begun to splinter the adult world around them. "All right, breakfast it is," I said, forcing energy into my voice. I shuffled into the kitchen, the smell of yesterday's leftover coffee lingering faintly in the air. Opening the fridge, I pulled out eggs and bread, simple but nourishing. As the skillet warmed, I thought again of the neatly labeled Mother's Day meal reserved for my daughter's mother-in-law, untouched and waiting in the fridge. I scrambled the eggs, slowly listening to the children chatter at the table. "Grandma, did you get a gift yesterday?" Emma asked, suddenly tilting her head the way only children do when they're seeking truth without realizing its sharp edges. I paused the spatula midair. For a moment I considered lying. "Yes, I did, sweetheart. I got," but the words died on my lips. I couldn't bring myself to invent a false gift, a pretend gesture. The betrayal was too fresh, too raw. "No, I didn't," I admitted softly. "But that's all right. Sometimes people forget." Emma frowned. "But it was Mother's Day. You're a mom too." Daniel banged his spoon against the table, adding, "Yeah, you should get a present too." Their outrage made me smile even as my heart ached. "You two are my presents," I told them. And in a way, it was true. Their presence softened the bitterness, reminding me of the love I was still capable of giving and receiving. After breakfast, the day unfolded with the peculiar rhythm of caring for children. I tied Emma's hair into two uneven pigtails while she squirmed impatiently, insisting she wanted them higher, then lower. Daniel built a tower of blocks, only to knock it over with a triumphant roar, scattering pieces across the floor. We played hide and seek, their giggles echoing as I pretended not to see Emma's tiny foot poking out from behind the curtains. I read them stories, my voice carrying through the pages as their eyes widened at dragons and castles. And when Daniel grew tired, he climbed into my lap without hesitation, pressing his head against my chest. His trust was total, unreserved. Yet beneath every moment of joy, a current of sorrow ran quietly, pulling at me like an undertow. I couldn't shake the image of my daughter laughing in some picturesque setting, clinking glasses with her mother-in-law while I sat here wiping crumbs from the floor. Love, it seemed, had become conditional in her eyes, reserved for those she deemed worthy of celebration, and I was not among them. During nap time, the house grew still. Emma lay curled up on the couch, her blanket clutched tightly while Daniel sprawled on the rug, his stuffed bear tucked under his arm. I tiptoed into the kitchen, searching for a moment's peace. As I poured myself a cup of lukewarm coffee, my eyes drifted again to the fridge. I opened it slowly, unable to resist. The Mother's Day dinner was still there, pristine, untouched, waiting. I read the labels again, written in my daughter's handwriting. "For Lucy, Happy Mother's Day." Lucy. The name might as well have been carved into stone. To my daughter, Lucy was the gold standard of motherhood. Polished, educated, from a family with means. She hosted elegant dinners, spoke softly, and wore pearls that shimmered under the dining room light. And me, I was the woman who patched hand-me-downs, stretched meals to last a week, and carried the weight of survival through gritted teeth. My daughter saw those years as something to escape, not honor. I closed the fridge with a sharp snap and pressed my palms against the counter, breathing deeply. I wasn't angry at Lucy, she had done nothing wrong. But I was angry at how invisible I had become in my own daughter's story. That afternoon, Emma asked me to help her with a drawing. She wanted to make a picture of her family. "Can you draw Grandma Lucy too?" she asked innocently, sliding the paper toward me. I froze. "Do you want me to draw myself as well?" I asked gently. Emma blinked. "Of course. You're my grandma." She said it as if it were the simplest truth in the world. I drew carefully, my hand trembling slightly as I sketched the outlines of people who seemed so close yet felt worlds apart. Emma smiled brightly at the finished picture. "Now everyone's here. Everyone's here. Except I wasn't really there, was I? Not in the way that counted." By evening, my body ached from chasing them around, cleaning spills and folding laundry. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, watching the sun dip below the horizon. I thought about the years I had poured into my daughter's life. The nights of sewing costumes for her school plays, the weekends spent cheering at soccer games in the rain, the quiet sacrifices, always making sure she had the better portion, the newer shoes, the brighter future. And now in return, I was the afterthought. The caretaker when it was convenient, the placeholder when no one else was available. But as I sat there, the children asleep once more, I realized something profound. My love for them, my grandchildren, was the one thing no one could strip from me. Their laughter, their hugs, their small voices calling me grandma with unfiltered affection, those were mine. They saw me even if their mother no longer did. And yet, love alone wasn't enough to silence the ache. Not anymore. Because beneath the sweetness of their innocence, a quiet question began to grow in me, sharper and sharper with every passing hour. If my daughter could erase me on Mother's Day, what else was she capable of erasing? That thought haunted me long after the house went dark. By midnight, I lay awake on the couch again, the children's soft breathing filling the silence. I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. Maybe this was just how things were meant to be, me in the shadows, her in the light. Maybe I should accept it. But then Emma's words replayed in my mind. "But it was Mother's Day. You're a mom too." And I realized that perhaps it wasn't about acceptance at all. Perhaps it was about reminding her and everyone else that I was not invisible. That seed of quiet defiance planted yesterday began to take root. And I knew this was only the beginning. When the children finally drifted off to sleep that night, the house felt unnervingly still. The kind of silence that pressed against your chest, making you notice every tick of the clock, every creak of the walls. I stood in the hallway for a moment, staring at their small forms curled up beneath blankets, their breaths soft and even. They looked so peaceful, so untouched by the sharp edges of betrayal. I lingered by the door, reluctant to step back into the emptiness of the house. Caring for them gave me purpose, but when they slept, all that remained was the weight of my own thoughts. Thoughts I tried to smother, but which came creeping back heavier with every hour. I turned and walked toward the kitchen, hoping a warm cup of tea might calm me. Instead, the glow from the fridge caught my eye once again. That same neatly labeled package for Lucy Happy Mother's Day sat there like a cruel reminder. I opened the door slowly and stared at it. The salmon glistened behind the plastic wrap, still perfectly arranged with its roasted vegetables and small cake. The irony was suffocating. I, the mother who had given everything, sat alone with cold scraps, while another woman celebrated and adored was given a meal worthy of a queen. I shut the fridge harder than I intended, the sound echoing in the empty house. I wandered into the living room, trying to distract myself. The walls were decorated with family photographs, smiling faces frozen in time. My daughter's wedding photo hung prominently framed in gold, her and her husband radiant in their youth. Next to it, a portrait of her children dressed for Easter. But as I scanned the gallery of memories, I realized something. My presence was minimal, almost erased. A few small pictures tucked into the edges, me holding Emma as a baby, blurry and poorly lit. A candid shot of me with Daniel at the park, half my face cut off. But Lucy, oh, she was everywhere. Smiling in family portraits, sitting proudly at birthdays, standing beside my daughter during holidays. Her image filled the frames where I should have been. I reached out and touched one of the photos, my finger tracing Lucy's face. It wasn't her fault. She hadn't asked to replace me, but the sting was no less sharp. My daughter had made a choice over and over again, and the evidence was right here on these walls. I sat down on the couch, the cushions sinking beneath me. Memories came flooding back without mercy. I remembered the night my daughter was born, how I had clutched her tiny body against my chest, promising her silently that I would always protect her, always sacrifice for her. I remembered the lean years when I worked double shifts at the school, scraping together enough to buy her the piano she begged for. She never learned to play it properly, but I never regretted the money spent because at the time, her smile was worth everything. And now, as I sat in her house surrounded by signs of my absence, I wondered if all those sacrifices had been invisible to her. Had she rewritten her life's story, placing Lucy as the benevolent heroine while I was just the shadow in the background? The thought was unbearable. I rose from the couch and began to wander the house aimlessly, letting my hands brush over the surfaces, the polished wooden table, the tidy shelves lined with books. In my wandering, I came across a closed drawer in the study. It wasn't locked. Inside, I found a stack of letters and cards. Some were birthday cards, some were notes from friends. But what caught my attention were the cards addressed to Lucy. "Thank you for being such a wonderful grandmother. You make everything so special. We're so lucky to have you." My chest tightened as I read the words. They were written by my daughter, her neat handwriting flowing across the pages, pouring affection and gratitude onto someone who had walked into her life later, someone who had not endured the struggles we had shared. I placed the cards back slowly, my hands trembling. I knew then that the divide was deeper than I wanted to admit. This wasn't just about one Mother's Day trip. It was about years of subtle rejection, years of being sidelined. I sat down in the study chair, staring at the half-lit room. My daughter had built a narrative where I was the ordinary mother, reliable, practical, unremarkable. Lucy was the one she showcased, the one she elevated. And for the first time, I allowed myself to feel the anger fully. It wasn't a flash of rage, it was slow, heavy, like molten iron spreading through me. I whispered to the empty room, "After all I've given you, this is how you repay me." The silence gave no answer. Later, I returned to the living room and sat with my cup of tea untouched and cooling. I thought again of Emma's innocent words earlier, but it was Mother's Day. You're a mom too. Children saw things clearly without filters. They recognized what adults worked so hard to obscure. Emma knew the truth instinctively, that I deserved love, recognition, respect. If only her mother could see it too. But she didn't. And maybe she never would. And so, sitting there in the dim glow of the lamp, I made a decision. I would stop waiting for her validation. I would stop hoping she would suddenly remember all I had done. Instead, I would prepare myself for the day when the truth could no longer be hidden. That night, as I tucked the children back in after they stirred, Emma's sleepy voice broke the silence. "Grandma," she murmured, eyes half closed, "if Mommy forgets, I'll always remember." I froze, my throat tightening. I kissed her forehead gently, whispering, "That's all I need, sweetheart." But deep inside I knew it wasn't enough. Because while children remembered with pure hearts, adults erased with deliberate hands. And one day soon I would have to confront that erasure. Not with shouting, not with anger, but with truth so undeniable it would crack the false image my daughter had so carefully constructed. For now, though, I sat in the quiet watching the shadows stretch across the room and let the pain harden into resolve. Have you ever been in a situation like this? If you were in this situation, would you forgive or take revenge? Comment below to let us know. Morning light filtered through the curtains, soft and golden, but it did nothing to soften the ache in my chest. The children's laughter filled the kitchen as I made their pancakes, their joy spilling over like sunlight. Yet even as I smiled and poured syrup over Emma's plate inside, I felt hollow. It wasn't the chores or the fatigue, or even being left behind that carved the wound so deep. No, it was the memory of all I had done, all the years I had given only to be repaid with disregard. When Daniel smeared syrup across his cheek and Emma giggled uncontrollably, I excused myself for a moment, stepping into the hallway. I leaned against the wall and let the weight of my past come rushing back. I thought of my daughter as a child, how small her hand felt in mine on her first day of school, trembling with nerves. I had knelt down, looked her straight in the eyes, and told her, "You are brave enough for this world." She had clung to my words, walking through that classroom door with her chin lifted just a little higher. Years later, when she was a teenager, we fought often. She thought I was too strict, too old-fashioned. But I knew what dangers lurked in the world for a girl her age. I remember staying awake late into the night, waiting for her to come home from parties, praying she wouldn't fall into the traps that could ruin her future. She never saw those prayers, those fears. She only saw my rules. And then came college. We had no money, not really. My salary as an elementary school teacher barely kept us afloat, but I worked evenings tutoring grading until my fingers cramped. I took in sewing jobs on weekends, patching clothes for neighbors. Every extra dollar I funneled toward her tuition. I remember the day she got her acceptance letter. She cried tears of joy, wrapping her arms around me. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom." But now, years later, it seemed she had forgotten. Marriage came next, and I stood proudly at her wedding, my dress simple but chosen with care. I remember watching her beam at her husband, seeing her future spread wide before her. I was happy, truly. My little girl had grown, had found her partner. But even then, I noticed small things. The way she leaned more on her mother-in-law for advice than me. The way she introduced Lucy to her friends as the kind of woman I want to be. I brushed it off at the time, telling myself I was imagining it. That a mother's love was too strong to be replaced. But replacements don't happen overnight. They happen slowly, like cracks forming in a wall, widening until the structure can no longer hold. And with each holiday, each family gathering, I found myself pushed further to the side. I returned to the kitchen, the children still chattering away. I smiled for them, but behind the smile was the sharp sting of realization I had been preparing for this pain without knowing it. Every unnoticed sacrifice, every unthanked gesture, every dismissal, they were bricks laid one by one until a wall stood between my daughter and me. That afternoon, while the children napped again, I sat at the kitchen table with a photo album I found on the shelf. I turned the pages slowly, memories spilling out with every glossy picture. There was my daughter's first birthday, me in the background, holding the cake steady so she could blow out the candle. Her graduation, me standing off to the side, clapping as she posed proudly with her diploma. Her wedding, me smiling, though I remember crying myself to sleep that night, already sensing the shift that had begun. And then the newer photos, the family vacations where Lucy was present, smiling wide, while I was absent entirely. The birthday parties where Lucy held the children on her lap wearing pearls and pastel dresses while I wasn't even invited. It was like watching myself fade from existence in my own family's story. That night, Emma wandered into the living room clutching her stuffed rabbit. She climbed onto the couch beside me and whispered, "Grandma, why are you sad?" I turned quickly, masking my expression. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. Just tired." But children see the truth more clearly than adults do. She pressed closer, resting her head against my arm. "I love you," she murmured, already half asleep. Those 3 words, simple and pure, struck me harder than anything else. They reminded me that love was still there, even if not from the one I had given everything to. Lying awake later, I allowed myself to face the truth. My daughter's actions weren't just thoughtless, they were rooted in something deeper. She saw me as ordinary, unremarkable. A stepping stone to the life she wanted, not a person to be honored. Lucy, with her refinement and wealth, fit into the image my daughter wanted for herself. She was a reflection of successive status. And I was a reminder of struggle, of the years when money was tight, when survival was a daily battle. I realized then that my daughter wasn't just neglecting me. She was ashamed of me. That truth cut deeper than any insult, but pain can be a strange kind of teacher. As I lay in the dark, I understood something new. While my sacrifices had built her life, they had also built me. I wasn't just the struggling mother she saw. I was a survivor. A woman who carried her family through storms. A woman who knew how to endure. And endurance has a way of turning into quiet power. So I decided that night I would no longer measure my worth by her recognition. Instead, I would prepare myself. I would gather the moments, the truths, the undeniable evidence of who I was and what I had done. And when the time came, when the right moment arrived, I would not be silent. For now, though, I pressed a kiss to Emma's forehead as she slept and whispered, "I love you too." But as I pulled the blanket over her, my heart whispered something else. "One day your mother will know what she has done, and I would be the one to show her." The days after that Mother's Day passed like shadows, lingering longer than I wanted them to. My daughter and her husband returned from their trip glowing with the satisfaction of luxury, chattering about dinners, spas, and sightseeing. They walked in the door like royalty returning from a coronation. I was at the stove making soup for the children when they came in. My daughter swept past me, her perfume heavy, her smile wide. "Oh, Mom, you're a lifesaver. Thank you for watching the kids. I don't know what we'd do without you." The words were polite, practiced but shallow. She kissed the children and then turned, her voice suddenly bright. "Lucy had the most wonderful time. We went to that French bistro I told you about, Mom. You know, the one with the 5-course tasting menu. She was so impressed." I nodded, stirring the soup slowly. She didn't notice how tightly I gripped the spoon. Lucy. Always Lucy. Later that evening, after the children were in bed, my daughter sat across from me with a glass of wine. She began to recount details of the trip, her face glowing in the lamplight. "You should have seen Lucy," she said, laughing lightly. "She just has this grace about her. The way she carries herself, the way people respond to her. Everyone loved her." I forced a smile. I'm glad she enjoyed herself. She leaned back, her eyes dreamy. Sometimes I think I could learn so much from her. The way she handles social situations, the way she dresses, even the way she speaks. It's so refined, so cultured. Her words landed like stones in my chest. What she meant, though she didn't say it outright, was clear. "Not like you." I excused myself to the bathroom, closing the door quietly behind me. I looked in the mirror, the light harsh against my lined face. I saw the woman she saw, plain, weary, ordinary. But as I stared at my reflection, I whispered, "You carried her through storms. Don't you forget that." Yet even as I reminded myself, the echo of her comparisons burned in my mind. The next day, I overheard her on the phone with a friend. She was in the kitchen laughing, her voice carrying down the hallway. "Yes, it was amazing," she said. "I took Lucy with me, of course. She just knows how to enjoy life. You know, she makes everything elegant. I swear I want to be just like her when I'm older." There was a pause, then another laugh. "My mom." "Oh, she watched the kids. She's dependable like that. But Lucy is inspiring." I stopped in my tracks. The air knocked out of me. Inspiring. That word cut like glass. To her, I was dependable, useful, a function, but never inspiring. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake on the couch, the silence pressing in. Images flashed through my mind, my daughter as a little girl, her head on my shoulder, as she cried over a broken toy. The hours I spent teaching her how to read, how to ride a bike, how to stand tall when the world seemed too big. I had been her inspiration once. I had been everything once. But now I was the caretaker in the shadows. Lucy was the woman she held in the light. The comparisons didn't stop. At dinner one evening, she commented casually, "Lucy always says salmon is healthier than chicken. You should try her recipe sometime, Mom. It's so sophisticated." When she bought a new dress, she said, "Lucy told me this color is timeless. Isn't she just so stylish?" Even with the children, her words lingered. Lucy reads them such beautiful stories. She has such a calming presence. They just adore her. Every sentence was a knife slipped in with a smile. I said nothing, not out loud. But inside I was bleeding. One afternoon, Emma tugged at my sleeve while I folded laundry. "Grandma Mommy says Grandma Lucy is fancy. Are you fancy too?" Her question was so innocent it nearly broke me. I crouched down, looking into her big eyes. "No, sweetheart," I said gently. "I'm not fancy, but I am yours, and that matters more than anything." She hugged me tightly, satisfied with my answer. But I wasn't satisfied, because even if Emma and Daniel loved me, their mother was shaping the story. They would grow up believing that Lucy was the admirable one, the cherished one. And I would remain the caretaker in the background. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a pen and paper. I began to write. I wrote about the sacrifices, the nights I went without sleep, the meals I skipped so she could eat, the jobs I took so she could thrive. I wrote about the years of silence, the moments of joy, the times when her happiness was the only thing that mattered. I wasn't writing for her, not yet. I was writing for myself, to remind myself that I was more than dependable, that I was a mother who had given everything. The pages filled quickly, the ink pressing deep into the paper. And as I wrote, I felt something shift inside me. The comparisons no longer just hurt, they fueled me. They hardened my resolve. If she wanted to place Lucy on a pedestal, so be it. But one day the truth would come crashing down. And when it did, no pedestal would be tall enough to hide her cruelty. The next morning, Emma climbed into my lap with her drawing. She had sketched a family picture again, Mommy, Daddy, Daniel, herself, Grandma Lucy, and me. But this time she drew me in the center, holding both children's hands. "See, Grandma? You're in the middle," she said proudly. I hugged her tightly, tears stinging my eyes. "Thank you, sweetheart." Because in that simple picture, Emma had captured what my daughter could not see, that I was not just a shadow. I was the anchor, the steady hand, the one who held the family together when no one else would. Still, even as Emma's innocent love lifted me, I knew the truth. My daughter's comparisons were no accident. They were deliberate, shaping a story where Lucy was cherished and I was diminished. But I also knew these stories can be rewritten. And one day soon, I would pick up the pen. The front door opened with a burst of laughter. My daughter's voice floated into the hallway, light and carefree. I was in the living room folding the children's laundry when she swept in with shopping bags dangling from her wrists. "Mom, we're back," she called, as though her words were enough to bridge the gap of absence and betrayal. Her husband followed behind her, lugging a suitcase. The air seemed to shimmer with their excitement. They had clearly had a wonderful time. My daughter's cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright with stories she couldn't wait to share. She walked over and kissed me on the cheek, her smile wide and effortless. "Thank you so much, Mom. You're the best. Really." It was a simple smile, polite, practiced, empty of depth. But it cut me deeper than any sharp word could, because behind that smile was an unspoken truth. She believed I would always be here, always available, always willing to take the lesser role without complaint. Her smile was not gratitude, it was assumption. The children rushed in, squealing with joy. Emma clung to her mother's legs. Daniel bounced with excitement. "Mommy, did you bring us anything?" Emma asked, her eyes sparkling. My daughter laughed and reached into one of her bags, pulling out two small toys. The children gasped with delight, their little faces glowing. I stood back watching quietly, the laundry still folded neatly in my hands. No one noticed me in that moment. Not the children, not my daughter, not even her husband. I was the backdrop, the steady stage on which their performance played out. And when my daughter turned to me, her smile still plastered on her face, I realized that in her mind everything was perfectly balanced. She had enjoyed her trip, Lucy had been celebrated, the children were happy, and I, dependable, invisible me, had served my role. She didn't see the fracture. She didn't see the wound. She only saw what she wanted to see, a mother who existed solely to make her life easier. Later that evening, after the children were tucked into bed, we sat together in the living room. My daughter lounged on the couch, scrolling through photos on her phone. She laughed softly to herself, occasionally turning the screen toward me. "Look at this one," she said, showing me a picture of Lucy at a vineyard holding a glass of wine. "Doesn't she look beautiful? So elegant." I glanced at the photo, then back at her face. She was glowing, intoxicated not by the wine, but by Lucy's presence. "She really is something else," my daughter continued dreamily. "The way she carries herself, she just makes everything special." I nodded faintly, though my throat tightened. It was the same refrain I had heard over and over. Lucy was elegant. Lucy was graceful. Lucy was special. And I was dependable. I was useful. But never enough to be cherished. Her smile returned as she tucked the phone away, leaning back against the cushions. "I'm so glad I took her with us. It made the trip perfect." She didn't notice the way my hands curled into fists on my lap. She didn't notice the silence stretching between us. Her smile was a blade, and it slid deeper with every passing second. When I finally excused myself, I went to the guest room where I had been staying. I closed the door softly and sat on the edge of the bed. The room was small, neat, impersonal. A place for convenience, not belonging. I stared at the wall, her smile replaying in my mind like a haunting. That smile wasn't warmth, it was dismissal disguised as kindness. And suddenly the memories of every smile like that came rushing back. The times she smiled when asking me to babysit so she could attend a party. The times she smiled when I gave her money, promising to repay, but never doing so. The times she smiled when comparing me to Lucy, softening the blow of her words, but making them sting all the more. Smiles, I realized, can wound more than anger. Anger is honest, raw, visible. But a smile conceals cruelty beneath charm. And my daughter had mastered it. The next morning, I made breakfast as usual. The children chattered about their toys, my daughter hummed to herself while scrolling through her phone, and her husband read the news on his tablet. Life had returned to its rhythm as though nothing had happened. But for me, nothing was the same. I looked around the table and felt like a stranger in their home. A stranger who cooked, cleaned, and watched over the children, but who never truly belonged. When my daughter caught my eye, she smiled again, that same empty smile, and I realized with clarity to her, I was invisible. And worse, she thought I was content to remain so. That afternoon, while folding laundry in the quiet of the guest room, Emma wandered in. She climbed onto the bed and watched me silently for a moment before speaking. "Grandma, why don't you go on trips with Mommy too?" she asked softly. The question pierced me. I set the folded shirt down and turned to her, forcing gentleness into my voice. "Sometimes grown-ups make different choices, sweetheart," I said carefully. "But I like staying with you and Daniel. That's special to me." She nodded, but her brow furrowed. But Mommy always says Lucy makes things better. Doesn't she think you make things better too? My heart squeezed at her words. I reached out and pulled her into my arms. Oh, darling, you and Daniel make my world better. That's what matters to me. She hugged me tightly, her little arms around my neck. I think you're better than Lucy, she whispered as if sharing a secret. Tears burned my eyes, but I held them back. I kissed her forehead, whispering, "Thank you, my love." Children see truth. They cut through the illusions adults build. Emma's words were a balm on my wound, even as the wound itself deepened. That night, as I lay awake again, I thought about the power of smiles. Lucy's smile was admired, cherished, celebrated. My daughter's smile was a weapon dismissing my worth while pretending to honor me. And mine had been the smile of endurance. Smiling through hardship so she wouldn't see my fear. Smiling through exhaustion so she would feel safe. Smiling through disappointment so she could believe her world was secure. I had given her every smile of mine. And in return, she had given me one that said, "You're only here because I allow you to be." The realization hardened into something new that night. Resentment had been building, yes, but now it transformed into resolve. One day that smile of hers, so polished, so dismissive, would falter. One day I would be the one smiling not out of cruelty, but out of victory. A quiet, undeniable victory built on truth. For now I kept folding, kept cooking, kept loving the children. But inside me a fire had been lit. And though she didn't see it yet, that fire would one day burn through the false image she had created. Her smile might cut me now, but soon it would cut her. The house was quiet again. The children had gone to school. My daughter was at work and her husband had left early for a meeting. I lingered in the guest room trying to gather my thoughts, but the silence felt suffocating. I decided to tidy up a habit of mine when emotions grew heavy. Cleaning gave me control order when everything else seemed unraveling. I started in the living room, straightening the cushions, dusting the shelves, folding a throw blanket. Then I moved to the study, a space I rarely entered, but the children often left their toys scattered in there. The desk was cluttered papers, receipts, and open notebooks. As I bent to collect crayons from the floor, my eyes landed on a small leather-bound journal sitting slightly ajar. It wasn't locked, just left there, unattended, like a secret daring me to uncover it. At first, I told myself to ignore it. It wasn't mine. It wasn't meant for me. But something pulled me closer, a quiet instinct that whispered, "Look, know the truth." My hands trembled slightly as I opened the cover. The first pages were lists, grocery items, reminders, small notes. But as I turned the pages, my heart sank. There in her familiar handwriting were words about me. Sometimes I feel like having her around is such a burden. She means well, but she's so old-fashioned. She doesn't fit into our life anymore. I read the lines over and over, the ink blurring as tears welled in my eyes. My chest felt tight, like someone had pressed a weight against me. Another entry: I wish she'd stop hovering. She doesn't realize she's just in the way. Lucy never makes me feel that way. Lucy is easy, graceful. Mom is suffocating. The words cut deeper than knives. Suffocating. A burden. And then, as though she hadn't hurt me enough, I turned another page and found this. Sometimes I think I love Lucy more than I love my own mother. She understands me in ways Mom never could. When I think of family dinners, holidays, I picture Lucy at the table, not her. I pressed a hand to my mouth to stifle a sob. My legs trembled beneath me, and I sank into the desk chair, clutching the notebook as though it might shatter in my grip. How could she write such things? How could she put into words the betrayal I had already felt, confirming the fears I had buried deep? Memories collided in my mind like shards of broken glass. The nights I stayed awake to soothe her nightmares. The winters I went without a coat so she could have a new one. The pride in my chest when she graduated, when she walked down the aisle, when she held her first child. And now all of it reduced to a burden, suffocating. In the way. I wanted to close the notebook, to walk away, to pretend I had never read it. But I couldn't. My hands flipped the pages with a will of their own, searching for more, even though each word pierced deeper. Sometimes I feel guilty. She did a lot for me when I was younger, but that doesn't mean I owe her my life now. I've moved on. I need space to build my own world. Lucy is part of that world. Mom, not so much. Guilt, space, not part of her world. I closed the notebook finally, my breath shallow, my vision blurred. I sat there in the silence, the weight of her words pressing on me like chains. I had known, of course. Deep down, I had known. The signs had been everywhere, but seeing it written raw, undeniable, was a different kind of wound. It wasn't just neglect, it was rejection. I don't know how long I sat there staring at the closed journal on the desk. Minutes, maybe hours. When the sound of the front door opening startled me, I jumped, shoving the notebook back exactly as I'd found it. My daughter's voice called out, cheerful, oblivious. Mom, you here? I swallowed hard, forcing my voice steady. Yes, just tidying up. She walked into the study, smiling as if nothing had happened. Her eyes flicked to the desk, then back to me. If she noticed the shift in me, she didn't comment. I thought we'd have dinner together tonight, she said casually. Lucy shared this great recipe with me, salmon with lemon butter. You'll love it. Her smile was bright, her tone warm, but all I could hear were the words from her notebook echoing in my mind. A burden, suffocating, not part of her world. I forced a nod, my throat too tight to speak. That evening, as we sat at the dinner table, she chatted about her day, about Lucy's advice, about the children's school. I sat quietly, picking at the salmon she had proudly prepared. It was good, perfectly seasoned, elegant, just as Lucy would have made it. But every bite felt like ash in my mouth. She laughed at something her husband said, the sound light and musical. To anyone else, it would have seemed like a happy family dinner, but to me, it was a performance. And I was the ghost at the table, unseen, unheard. I excused myself early, retreating to the guest room. There in the solitude, I let the tears fall freely. I thought I had reached the depths of pain already. But that night, I realized there were deeper layers still. To be diminished is one thing. To be compared unfavorably is another. But to be replaced in your own daughter's heart, that was a grief I had no words for. And yet beneath the grief, something else stirred. Her words had hurt me, yes, but they had also clarified something I had struggled to admit. She did not see me. She did not value me. She did not want me in her world. And if that was the truth, then I no longer had anything to lose. I wiped my tears and stared at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were red, my face weary, but beneath the sorrow there was a glimmer of steel. I whispered to myself, she may not see me now, but one day she will. And when that day comes, she'll remember every word she wrote. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake replaying every line from that journal, engraving them in my memory. Not to torture myself, but to prepare, because words once written can be forgotten. But once revealed, they can never be taken back. And I knew then I would hold on to this truth quietly, patiently, until the day came when her own words would be her undoing. The weight of that journal never left me. Even when I was making breakfast for the children, even when I walked them to the park, even when I smiled at Emma's drawings, those words throbbed in my chest like an unhealed wound. A burden. Suffocating. Not part of her world. I tried to bury it, but anger has a way of surfacing like water seeping through cracks in stone. So when the evening came and my daughter breezed into the kitchen humming, I couldn't hold it back anymore. She set her bag down on the counter and began chopping vegetables, her phone buzzing with messages. Mom, could you check if we have more olive oil? Lucy told me this brand is the best, and I want to get it right. Her voice was cheerful, casual, but I couldn't pretend anymore. I placed the dish towel I'd been holding on the counter and said quietly but firmly, "We need to talk." She looked up surprised. "About what?" "About what I mean to you," I said. My own voice startled me, steady low, carrying years of silence behind it. She frowned, setting the knife down. "Mom, what are you talking about?" I took a breath. "I know what you've been writing. I know how you feel about me. That I'm a burden. That I don't fit into your world. That you love Lucy more than me." Her face froze. For a moment her eyes flickered shock, guilt, panic. Then just as quickly she smoothed it away, her mouth curving into a tight smile. "You read my private things," she said coldly. I felt heat rise in my chest. "I wasn't looking for it. But it was there. And you wrote it. Don't you dare turn this into me invading your privacy, when the truth is you've been carving me out of your life piece by piece." Her eyes hardened. "You're overreacting." The words landed like a slap. "Overreacting?" I whispered, stunned. "You wrote that I suffocate you, that I don't belong in your world, that Lucy is more of a mother to you than I am. And you think I'm overreacting?" She crossed her arms, her tone sharp. "Mom, people write things when they're frustrated. It doesn't mean I don't love you. You're taking it too seriously." I laughed bitterly, the sound foreign in my throat. Too seriously. Do you realize what it feels like to read that your own child sees you as a burden? After everything I gave, everything I sacrificed. She sighed heavily, rolling her eyes as though I were a petulant child. "Mom, I can't be responsible for your feelings all the time. You did what you did because you wanted to. I never asked you to give up your life for me." Her words sliced deeper than anything in that notebook. I stared at her, my chest heaving. Memories flashed: the late nights at the sewing machine, the endless tutoring sessions, the skipped meals, the exhaustion I hid so she could believe her childhood was stable. And now she stood before me, dismissing it all as though it were voluntary charity, something I had done for myself. "You didn't ask," I said, my voice shaking. "But I gave. I gave because I loved you, because I wanted you to have a future. And now you repay me by pushing me aside for Lucy, by praising her in front of me, by treating me like a maid who just exists to watch your children." Her lips thinned. "This is exactly what I mean. Drama. Guilt. You always make everything about you." My hands trembled, not from weakness but from fury. "And you always make everything about Lucy. Do you even hear yourself? Every word out of your mouth is about her grace, her elegance, her advice. Where do I fit into that? Where does your mother fit into her own daughter's life?" She looked at me with an expression I'll never forget. Pity laced with irritation. "Mom, family means compromise. You can't expect everything to revolve around you. Lucy brings something different to my life, and I value that. Why can't you just be happy for me?" I sank into the nearest chair, the strength draining from me. Happy for her. She wanted me to be happy about being erased. I pressed my hands together tightly, trying to steady myself. "Do you know what Emma asked me?" She asked if I was fancy like Lucy, because that's what you've been teaching her, that I'm ordinary, while Lucy is extraordinary. Do you understand what you're doing to your own children?" That seemed to catch her off guard. Her face flickered with uncertainty, but she masked it quickly. "Emma's a child. She doesn't understand nuance. And anyway, isn't it good for her to have role models?" My heart broke again. She already has one. Me. But you've blinded her to that. The silence between us thickened. Finally, she let out a frustrated sigh. "Mom, I don't want to fight with you. You're important to me, but you need to stop making everything about whether you measure up to Lucy. That's not fair to her, and it's not fair to me." I stood slowly, my legs trembling but my back straight. "No, what's not fair is erasing the woman who gave you life. What's not fair is replacing your mother with another woman because she fits the image you want for yourself. What's not fair is asking me to care for your children while you celebrate someone else on Mother's Day. Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. I leaned closer, my voice low. You think I'm overreacting. You think I'll stay silent. But I won't. Not forever. One day, everyone will see the truth. Not the version you parade around, but the reality you've hidden. And when that day comes, you'll regret underestimating me. Her face paled slightly, but she forced a smile. Mom, you really need to calm down. I turned away, the conversation draining every ounce of energy from me. But as I walked back to the guest room, my resolve burned brighter than ever. That night, lying in the dark, I thought about her dismissal. You're overreacting. It wasn't just words, it was a shield. A way to deflect, to silence me, to make me doubt my own feelings. But I didn't doubt them anymore. She had written the truth in her journal. She had spoken the truth in her comparisons. She had shown the truth in her choices. And I finally had spoken mine. She might have brushed me off, but she had also seen the steel in my eyes. She knew now that I would not stay silent forever. And that knowledge unsettled her more than she would admit. After that confrontation, the air in the house changed. My daughter carried herself as though nothing had happened, humming while she cooked, laughing with the children, chatting with Lucy on the phone in her usual bright tone. But I saw the flicker in her eyes when she glanced at me, the quick way her smile faltered before returning. She thought the matter was closed. That her dismissive words, "Your overreacting family means compromise," had silenced me. She believed I would fold back into the background, resume my role as the dependable caretaker, content with scraps of affection. But she was wrong. Something inside me had shifted that night. The wound was still there, raw and burning, but it no longer weakened me. It hardened me. It sharpened me. I realized then that I could scream. I could cry. I could demand acknowledgement, and none of it would matter. She would always brush me off, minimize me, label me dramatic. No, if I wanted her to see me, truly see me, I would need another way. Not with noise, with silence, not with fury, with patience. Not with vengeance shouted in the moment, but revenge carved carefully so that when it came, it would be undeniable. I began observing more closely. I watched how she interacted with her children, how she corrected them, how she slipped Lucy's name into conversations like seasoning sprinkled on every dish. I paid attention to the things she valued: appearances, reputation, being admired by others. She cared about what people thought about being seen as the perfect daughter, the perfect wife, the perfect mother. And I knew then my weapon would not be anger. It would be truth. Because the truth revealed at the right time could shatter the image she had built. So I began to gather quietly. Emma, with her innocent curiosity, often revealed more than her mother realized. "Mommy says Lucy's house is prettier than yours," she once said to me without malice while coloring at the kitchen table. "Did she now?" I asked softly. Emma nodded carefully, shading in the petals of her flower. "But I think your house is cozy. I like it better." I smiled, though my heart twisted. My daughter was poisoning the children's perception even without meaning to. But Emma's innocence also gave me something, a small, unfiltered truth that no one could deny later. And Daniel, sweet Daniel, often came to me for comfort when his mother was too busy. He would curl into my lap, thumb in his mouth, whispering, "Grandma, you always listen." Those words became another thread of evidence woven silently into my memory. At night, while the house slept, I wrote. I wrote down everything Emma and Daniel said. Every comparison my daughter made aloud. Every word she had written in her notebook. I was building something, not a story of my pain, but a record of her cruelty. Something she would never be able to deny when the time came, because the day would come. I didn't know when or how, but it would. And when it did, I would not need to shout. I would only need to reveal. Meanwhile, I continued to play my role. I cooked, I cleaned, I cared for the children. Outwardly, nothing had changed. When my daughter smiled at me, I smiled back, though my smile carried a weight she didn't notice. When she praised Lucy in front of me, I nodded, though I was memorizing every word. When she dismissed me as ordinary, I let her, because soon ordinary would speak louder than her elegance. She thought she had silenced me. In reality, she had awakened me. One evening, as we all sat at the dinner table, my daughter gushed about Lucy again. Lucy said the sweetest thing at lunch today. She said having me as a daughter-in-law was the greatest blessing of her life. Her husband smiled, nodding. "That's Lucy for you. Always gracious." And then, as if twisting the knife deliberately, my daughter added, "You know, sometimes I feel like I won the lottery with her." I stayed quiet, sipping my water. But inside I thought, one day you will wish you hadn't said that in front of me. Because the more she paraded Lucy, the more obvious the imbalance became. Not just to me, but to anyone who paid attention. And when the moment came, I would make sure everyone saw it clearly. I began noticing small cracks in her perfect image. At a school event, Emma ran to me first, hugging my legs tightly while my daughter looked mildly annoyed at the display. A teacher commented, "Your mother must be very involved with the children. They clearly adore her." My daughter laughed it off, but I saw the flicker in her eyes. She wanted Lucy to be admired. Not me. Another time at the grocery store, a neighbor stopped me. "Margaret, you're always with the kids. You must be so proud. They're lucky to have you." I thanked her politely, but my daughter later muttered, "People exaggerate. You don't have to take credit for everything." Credit. The word stung. I hadn't asked for credit, only acknowledgement. But now I knew where her insecurity lay. She wanted the spotlight. She wanted the praise. And the fact that others noticed me, dependable, ordinary me, chipped at her carefully curated image. So I waited. And I planned. I didn't know what form it would take yet, a family gathering perhaps. Or a holiday dinner. A moment when she would be shining her brightest, basking in Lucy's glow. And then, in that moment, I would reveal what I had gathered. Not with malice, not with shouting, but with quiet, undeniable truth. Her own words, her own actions, her own neglect mirrored back at her for everyone to see. Late at night, I lay awake, the house dark and still. I imagined the moment. The table filled with family, Lucy smiling gracefully, my daughter chattering, her voice dripping with praise. And then me sitting quietly until the time was right. And when I spoke, the room would fall silent. Eyes would turn. Truth would pour out steady and sharp, leaving no room for denial. I could almost hear the gasp, see the shift in their faces, watch as my daughter's perfect image cracked before them. I didn't know when it would happen, but I knew it would. And the thought brought me something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. For the first time, I wasn't drowning in sorrow. I was standing steady with a plan forming in my mind. She thought she had silenced me, but silence was only the surface. Beneath it, I was gathering strength, weaving the threads of her undoing. And when the tapestry was complete, it would not just be me she faced. It would be her own reflection, the truth she had tried so hard to bury. I whispered to myself in the dark, a vow only I could hear. How do you think they will react when I reveal that to everyone? The holiday season arrived with its usual flurry of activity, twinkling lights strung across rooftops. The smell of cinnamon drifting through kitchens, children rehearsing songs for school plays. But for me, the air carried a different charge. This was the moment I had been waiting for. My daughter insisted on hosting the family dinner that year. She was determined to show off her home, her cooking, her carefully curated life. And of course, she made sure Lucy was at the center of it all. "Lucy will sit beside me at the table," she announced as we set the dining room. "She deserves the place of honor. She makes every holiday so special." Her words stung, but I said nothing. Instead, I placed the silverware carefully, each knife and fork lined perfectly, my face calm. Inside, my resolve tightened like a bowstring. The guests began arriving, cousins, aunts, uncles, neighbors who had become family over the years. The house buzzed with conversation, coats piling up on the rack, children darting between adults with shouts of laughter. And then Lucy arrived. My daughter greeted her with open arms as though she were royalty entering the court. "Lucy, you look stunning," she gushed, taking her mother-in-law's coat and ushering her in. Lucy smiled graciously, offering small compliments to everyone. I watched from the kitchen doorway, my expression neutral. Lucy wasn't cruel. In truth, she was always polite to me, but that only made it worse. Her grace magnified my daughter's disregard, the contrast like a mirror held up to my absence. At dinner, the table glittered with candles and polished dishes. My daughter raised her glass to make a toast. "I just want to say how grateful I am to have everyone here," she began, her eyes shining. "And especially, I want to thank Lucy. She has been such an inspiration in my life. Truly, she is like a second mother to me, no more than that. She's my guiding light." The table erupted in polite applause. My daughter beamed, lifting her glass toward Lucy. "To the woman who has taught me grace, elegance, and strength." I raised my glass too, but my hand was steady, my face unreadable. The room buzzed with admiration, but beneath it I felt the air shift ever so slightly. A few eyes glanced toward me, lingering for a beat too long. They had heard the words. They had seen who had been left unacknowledged. I didn't need to say a thing. Not yet. Throughout the evening, my daughter continued her performance. "Lucy taught me this recipe," she said, serving the roasted vegetables. "Lucy always says presentation is everything," she added, arranging the salad. "Lucy told me the secret to raising happy children is balance," she explained as Emma and Daniel squirmed in their seats. Every word dripped with devotion, and every word chipped away at the image she was trying to build, because the more she spoke, the more obvious the imbalance became. Emma leaned toward me at one point, whispering, "Why doesn't Mommy say you taught her things too?" I stroked her hair gently, whispering back, "Because sometimes people forget, but forgetting doesn't change the truth." Her little hand squeezed mine, and in that moment I knew the truth was already taking root. As dessert was served, conversation grew livelier. Laughter filled the room, wine glasses clinked, children begged for extra slices of pie. My daughter basked in the glow, her eyes darting often to Lucy, as if waiting for approval. And then one of the uncles, tipsy with cheer, leaned back in his chair and said, "You know, Margaret, these kids are always clinging to you. You must spend more time with them than anyone else." The room went quiet for a beat. My daughter stiffened, her smile faltering. I smiled softly, keeping my voice even. "Children know who listens to them. That's all." The uncle chuckled, oblivious to the tension, but I saw it. My daughter's eyes narrowed ever so slightly, the cracks in her perfect image spreading. Later, as the dishes were cleared and guests moved to the living room, I sat quietly by the fire, Emma curled up against me. She had fallen half asleep, her head resting on my shoulder. From across the room, I watched my daughter. She laughed too loudly, poured wine for Lucy, spoke animatedly about recipes and traditions. But I saw the way her gaze flicked toward me, uneasy, calculating. She knew, even if she wouldn't admit it, my silence was not submission. It was waiting. When most of the guests had left and only close family remained, my daughter began clearing plates. I offered to help, but she waved me off. "Lucy and I will take care of it," she said pointedly. So I sat back watching as the two of them moved about the kitchen. They looked like a picture from a magazine, polished, elegant, harmonious. But I knew better. I had her words. I had her actions. I had her neglect written in her own hand, spoken from her own mouth, seen by her own children. The truth was already alive, waiting only for the right moment to be revealed. As the night wound down, her husband joined me by the fire. He looked at Emma sleeping against me, his expression softening. She really loves you, he said quietly. I nodded. And I love her. That's what matters. He hesitated, then added, I don't think she could get by without you. She won't say it, but you're the foundation here. I met his eyes, searching for sincerity. There was no malice, no mockery, only truth. Maybe one day she'll realize that, I said softly. He looked away uncomfortable, and I knew he understood more than he let on. That night, as I lay in the guest room, I replayed everything in my mind. My daughter's toasts, her endless praise of Lucy, the fleeting glances from family, the uncle's careless observation, her husband's quiet confession. The cracks were forming. Slowly, yes, but they were there. I didn't need to force them wider. I only needed to wait. Because the truth has a way of revealing itself when the performance becomes too grand, too exaggerated, too impossible to sustain. And my daughter's performance was already fraying. I turned off the light and whispered into the darkness, not as a threat, but as a promise to myself. Your stage is ready. And when the curtain falls, you won't be the only one in the spotlight. The days following the holiday gathering passed quietly on the surface, but underneath something had shifted. My daughter continued her routine as if nothing had happened, still humming in the kitchen, still praising Lucy at every turn, still wearing her polished smile. But she had seen the cracks. She had noticed the glances, the way silence hung after her toast, the way her husband's eyes lingered on me when the children ran into my arms. And slowly, without her realizing, her own children began to unravel the narrative she had built. One afternoon, Emma and Daniel were playing with blocks on the living room rug, while my daughter chatted on the phone nearby. She was telling a friend about Lucy again, describing how elegant she had looked at the dinner, how everyone had admired her. Daniel, absorbed in stacking his blocks, said absent-mindedly, "But Grandma cooks better than Lucy." The words slipped out of his little mouth with such simplicity, such conviction, that I froze where I sat. My daughter glanced down at him sharply, covering the phone with her hand. "Daniel, don't say that." "Why not?" he asked, blinking up at her. "Grandma makes the soup I like." "Lucy doesn't." Emma chimed in. "Yeah. Grandma tells the best stories too. Lucy doesn't do voices like she does." Their voices were innocent, unfiltered, but devastating. My daughter flushed, murmured something hurriedly into the phone, and ended the call. She forced a laugh. Kids say the silliest things. But her smile was tight, her eyes hard. I said nothing. I didn't need to. The next day, while helping Emma with her school project, she said, "Mommy told me Lucy helps her with everything. But I told my teacher that you help me more than anyone. I said you're the one who always listens when I get stuck." I felt tears prick my eyes, but I blinked them away. "That's very sweet, Emma. I'm proud of you." She smiled, completely unaware of how powerful her words were. Children have no agenda. They simply speak the truth as they see it. And their truth was beginning to shine through the cracks of my daughter's carefully constructed story. At a family brunch a week later, the unraveling continued. Lucy was there as always, sitting gracefully at the table. My daughter served her with exaggerated care, refilling her glass, praising her cooking tips, drawing the room's attention again and again to her mother-in-law's wisdom. But then Emma spoke up. "Grandma, tell everyone the story about when you saved me from the dog at the park," she shouted suddenly, her eyes wide with excitement. The table quieted, all eyes turning toward me. My daughter stiffened. "Emma, we don't need to." But Emma continued, oblivious. "The dog was so big and I was so scared, but Grandma picked me up and held me until it went away. She said I was safe." Daniel piped up eagerly. "And Grandma makes the best pancakes. Mommy burns them sometimes, but Grandma never does." Laughter rippled around the table. Some of the cousins chuckled, one of the uncles grinned. "Sounds like Margaret's the hero here," he said warmly. My daughter flushed, forcing a laugh. "Kids exaggerate, but I saw it the way Lucy's smile faltered slightly, the way my daughter's husband looked at me with something almost like guilt. The truth was seeping out uncontainable. Later that evening, after everyone had left, my daughter confronted me in the kitchen. "You need to stop encouraging them," she hissed, her eyes sharp. I blinked, feigning innocence. Encouraging them? They're children. They speak their truth. "You could correct them," she snapped. I tilted my head. Why would I correct love? Her jaw tightened, and for the first time she had no reply. She stormed off, leaving me standing alone with the quiet hum of the refrigerator. That night, I lay in bed replaying the scene. My daughter's panic was clear. She had built a narrative where Lucy was the shining figure and I was the shadow. But shadows cannot be erased when the light comes from the mouths of children. I didn't need to expose her. Her own children were doing it for me. And the witnesses had seen it. The laughter, the admiration, the casual comments about how much time I spent with Emma and Daniel. The truth was no longer mine alone. It was spreading, carried by voices too innocent to be silenced. A few days later, I overheard Emma talking to her father. "Daddy, why does Mommy always say Lucy is better? Grandma does more things for us." Her father hesitated. I stood unseen in the hallway, my breath caught. "Well," he said slowly, "Mommy admires Lucy. But you're right. Grandma does a lot. Maybe Mommy forgets to say it sometimes." Emma frowned. "That's not nice. Grandma should get flowers too." Her father chuckled softly. "Maybe you're right." I slipped away quietly, my heart pounding. It was happening. The narrative was unraveling thread by thread, not by my hand, but by the truth children couldn't help but speak. The next weekend, my daughter invited friends over for dinner. She wanted to impress them, of course, and Lucy was there again, seated proudly at the table. As everyone chatted, Emma ran in clutching a drawing. "Look, I drew my family," she exclaimed. She handed the paper to one of the guests, who admired it with a smile. There we all were, Mommy, Daddy, Emma, Daniel, Lucy, and me. But Emma had drawn me in the center, holding both children's hands with hearts above our heads. "Why is Grandma in the middle?" one of the guests asked, gently smiling. "Because she's the one who keeps us safe," Emma replied simply. The room fell silent for a moment. My daughter laughed too quickly, waving it off. Kids and their imaginations. But I saw the flicker in the guests' eyes, the way they glanced at me with a new kind of respect. That night, as I folded the drawing carefully and tucked it into my bag, I whispered to myself, "You can't silence the truth of children, and you can't erase the eyes that have seen it." The evidence was no longer hidden in journals or whispered in private. It was alive, spoken openly, witnessed by many. All I had to do was wait a little longer, because the next time the stage was set, the truth wouldn't just be suggested, it would be undeniable. And when that moment came, it wouldn't be me who brought her down. It would be her own children, her own words, her own choices. The moment came sooner than I expected. It was another family gathering, not as large as the holiday dinner, but enough. My daughter had invited her husband's relatives, some neighbors, and of course Lucy. The table was once again a showcase of her effort-polished cutlery, wine glasses, gleaming food arranged with perfection. She loved these performances, loved the stage, the audience, the admiration. And once again she centered Lucy in her spotlight. "Lucy has the most incredible recipe for soufflé," she announced, as she placed the dish down as though it were sacred. "I could never have made this without her guidance." Applause followed, polite laughter filling the room. My daughter's face glowed. She looked toward Lucy for approval, and Lucy, gracious as ever, smiled modestly. I sat quietly, sipping my water, my heart steady. I knew tonight would be the night. The evening wore on, and as usual, Lucy became the focus of every conversation. My daughter guided it that way, almost desperately. She bragged about Lucy's style, her advice, her grace. But then Daniel, sweet, honest Daniel, piped up between bites of mashed potatoes. But Mommy Grandma makes better pancakes than Lucy. The table erupted in laughter. My daughter's face flushed red. Daniel, eat your dinner? She snapped. Emma added innocently, and Grandma tells us stories every night. Lucy doesn't. Silence rippled through the table. I saw eyes flick toward me, curious, weighing the contrast. That was my cue. I placed my fork down carefully, the sound deliberate but not loud. My voice was calm, almost too calm. I think it's time the truth is spoken, I said softly, but the quiet around me gave my words weight. My daughter froze her glass halfway to her lips. Mom. No. I raised a hand steady. You've had your stage for long enough. You've paraded Lucy before us again and again as though she were the one who shaped your life. But that isn't true. And I can't sit here silently while you erase me in front of my own grandchildren. The room went utterly still. I turned slightly, addressing not just her, but everyone present. My voice was clear, unshaking. When she was little, I stayed awake through nights of fever, whispering lullabies until her breath steadied. I patched her clothes by candlelight so she could go to school without shame. I worked double shifts, saved pennies, gave up meals, all so she could walk across that graduation stage with pride. I carried her through storms even when my own body was breaking. I paused, scanning the faces around the table. Some looked away in discomfort, others leaned forward, listening intently. And now she says, I suffocate her, that I am a burden, that I don't belong in her world. Gasps rippled through the room. My daughter's face drained of color. Mom, stop, but I didn't. I had stayed silent too long. She writes it down. I continued, my voice cutting through the tension. In her own words, in her own hand. That Lucy is more of a mother to her than I could ever be. That she loves Lucy more. That she wishes I would stay out of the way. The shock was palpable. Lucy shifted uncomfortably, her usually graceful composure faltering. My daughter's husband stared at his wife, his expression a mix of confusion and anger. I pressed on, steady as stone. I found those words in her journal. And though she may say I overreacted, those words were real. They weren't slips of frustration, they were the truth she carries in her heart. My daughter shot to her feet, her voice trembling. How dare you? How dare I? I interrupted, my voice low but fierce. How dare you? On Mother's Day, you left me behind to care for your children while you celebrated another woman. You filled this house with her image, her praises, while treating me like a servant. And then you smiled at me as though I should be grateful for scraps of acknowledgement. Do you know what that smile felt like? A knife. And still, I stayed silent. Her lips trembled, her hands shaking. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I said, cutting her off again. You wanted to erase me, to replace me, to polish yourself with Lucy's reflection while burying the truth of where you came from. But the truth has a way of surfacing, doesn't it? Emma's small voice broke the silence. But I love you, Grandma. Daniel added, his little hand gripping mine. Me too. Their words, pure and innocent, struck harder than anything else I had said. They were the living proof of my worth, undeniable in their honesty. I looked around the table. Ask them. Ask the children, who comforts them, who listens, who cooks for them, who holds them when they're scared. Ask them who is always here. It isn't Lucy. It's me. The room was heavy with silence, the truth pressing down on everyone. Her husband finally spoke, his voice quiet but sharp. Is this true? He asked her, his eyes fixed on my daughter. She stammered, her face pale. She's twisting things, But no one looked convinced. The weight of my words, the innocence of the children's voices, the cracks in her performance, it was too much. Lucy herself placed a hand gently on my daughter's arm. Perhaps, she said carefully, you have been unkind without realizing. A mother's sacrifices are not so easily dismissed. My daughter shook her off, panic in her eyes. No, you don't understand. She's always. She makes me feel guilty. She's always. But her voice faltered. The more she tried to defend herself, the more hollow her words sounded. I stood slowly, my chair scraping softly against the floor. I don't need your apology, I said, my gaze steady on her. Because nothing you say now could erase what you've written, what you've spoken, what you've done. But I needed everyone here to see it, to see the truth of who you've become. My daughter's eyes brimmed with tears. Mom, please. But I shook my head. No. You wanted Lucy to be your mother. Then let her. I won't stop you. But remember this. You can replace me in your stories. You can replace me in your photos, but you cannot erase me from the hearts of your children. And you cannot erase the truth from those who have now heard it. The silence after my words was absolute. I gathered my bag, gently lifted Emma's drawing from the mantel, the one where she had placed me in the center, holding their hands, and tucked it inside. As I walked to the door, the children clung to me. Don't go, Grandma, Emma whispered. I'll never leave you, I promised softly, kissing her forehead. Not really. I'll always be here. And with that, I stepped out into the night air, the cool wind filling my lungs, my heart steady. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't cursed. I hadn't begged. I had only spoken the truth. And in that truth, I had reclaimed my dignity. The night I walked out of my daughter's house, the air was cool, crisp, and strangely liberating. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was dragging invisible chains behind me. My chest ached. Yes, but the ache wasn't weakness anymore. It was release. I had spoken the truth. And though it had cracked my daughter's image in front of everyone, I didn't feel triumphant in the way people imagine revenge feels. It wasn't about triumph. It was about reclaiming what had been stolen: my dignity, my voice, my place. The days that followed were quiet. I stayed in my own home, tending to the garden, drinking tea on the porch, watching the sun rise and fall without anyone demanding anything of me. I thought my daughter might call, might rage, might try to mend things. But the silence stretched on. I didn't mind, because something had changed that night. Not just in me, but in everyone who had been there. The silence around the table, the glances, the unease, they had all seen it. They had all heard it. The truth was no longer mine alone to carry. A week later, there was a knock at my door. It was Lucy. She stood there with a solemn expression, holding a small basket of fruit. Margaret, she said gently, may I come in? I hesitated, then stepped aside. We sat at the kitchen table, the air heavy with unspoken words. Finally, she spoke. I didn't realize how deeply she had been hurting you. I thought her praises were harmless, even kind. But now I see they came at your expense. I'm sorry. I studied her face. Lucy had never been cruel to me. In fact, her kindness had only deepened my daughter's betrayal. It wasn't you, I said quietly. It was her choice, her blindness. Lucy nodded. Still, I don't want to be part of erasing you. You are her mother. That can never be replaced. For the first time, I believed she meant it. The grandchildren visited a few days later. Emma clutched my hand the entire time, Daniel curled against my side. They told me about school, about games, about how much they missed me at the house. Mommy doesn't talk about Lucy as much, Emma whispered. She's quieter now. I kissed her forehead. Sometimes truth makes people quiet, sweetheart, because they're thinking. And maybe one day they'll change. Emma nodded, satisfied. But I knew better. Change, if it came, would take years. And perhaps it would never come at all. Still, I had what mattered: the love of those children, pure and unwavering. I didn't need an apology from my daughter anymore. Apologies given under pressure are empty. What I had was better. I had shown her reflection to the world, and she could no longer deny it. She would carry those words, that shame, every time she looked at her children, every time she tried to praise Lucy again. She would remember the silence at that table, the eyes that no longer saw her performance, but her cruelty. That was enough. Weeks turned into months. The sting of betrayal dulled, replaced by a quiet strength. I poured my energy into myself again. My garden bloomed. I joined a book club at the library. I even began painting again, something I hadn't done in decades. I realized that for too long I had lived in her shadow, waiting for her to acknowledge me, to give me back the worth I had already earned. But dignity cannot be given. It must be claimed. And I had claimed mine. Sometimes late at night I still thought about the girl she once was, the little girl who held my hand tightly, who cried into my chest, who whispered, "Don't ever leave me, Mommy." That girl was gone, replaced by a woman who wanted polish more than roots, appearances more than truth. But I no longer grieved that loss. I accepted it. Because though she might never see me as I truly am, her children do. And that is enough. Slow emotional, fade out 200 and 300 words. Now as I sit by my window watching the children play in the yard during their visits, I feel a peace I once thought impossible. The ache of betrayal still lingers like an old scar, but it no longer defines me. I am not the invisible woman she tried to make me. I am the grandmother whose lap is a safe haven, whose stories weave laughter into bedtime, whose meals nourish more than the body. I am the mother who sacrificed, endured, and survived. One day, perhaps she will look back and see what she has done. Perhaps she will remember the nights I carried her through storms, the years I fought for her future. Or perhaps she will not. But I am no longer waiting for her recognition. The truth has already been spoken. The children already know. The witnesses already saw. And I have finally let go of silence. So if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been dismissed, replaced, or erased, let me tell you this: your worth does not disappear because someone refuses to see it. Your truth is still yours, and one day it will shine. And now I ask you, have you ever been in a situation like this? If you were me, would you forgive? Or would you let the truth itself be your revenge? Comment below and let us know. And don't forget to subscribe to Grace's Truth for more stories that reveal the quiet power we all carry inside.